6 months. That's how long I'd been gone. Not a vacation, not a work trip. I left. No forwarding address. No casual check-ins. No hope you're doing okay texts. Just silence. Like I'd been swallowed by the earth. And somehow, some messed up part of me thought coming back might feel like picking up where we left off. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a moment of shock, maybe anger. Even relief in some twisted part of me. What I didn't expect, what I was completely unprepared for, was indifference. The first thing I noticed wasn't Laura herself. It was the house. Something about the way the air moved or didn't. The way her coat, definitely new, was draped over a chair she used to hate. How the hallway smelled different. She used to love citrus candles. Now it was something heavier, muskier, like sandalwood or tobacco. It didn't feel like her. Or maybe it didn't feel like us. She came down the stairs like she'd been mid-shower or mid-song, caught in the middle of living a completely separate life. Her hair was damp and tied up, and she wore one of those oversized sweaters that didn't exist in our shared closet when I left. I stood in the middle of the living room, duffel bag in hand, the door still open behind me. Her eyes widened when she saw me, but not in a way that screamed relief. It was more like her brain was scrambling to file the situation under something understandable. Like seeing a ghost. Or worse, a mistake. She didn't say anything. Just froze. For too long. I knocked, I said, forcing a smile. Guess you didn't hear. You shouldn't be here, she replied, almost like a reflex. Her voice was thin and fast, like someone used to controlling a conversation. It wasn't how she used to talk to me. I used my key, I said. Still works. She didn't respond. She just tilted her head a little, like she was trying to figure out whether to be angry or afraid or neither. I tried to fill the silence. I didn't know where else to go. I figured, here would be a place to start. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorway, the sweater pulling tighter across her body. She didn't say welcome back. She didn't ask if I was okay. Just stood there, guarded. She was calculating something. I'm not staying long, I added. Just, look, can we talk? Now you want to talk? She said, voice sharper. After 6 months of nothing? I needed time, Laura. You know that. No, she said. I know you left. My fingers curled around the strap of my bag. I felt like a trespasser in my own home. Her home now, I guess. Who was the reservation for? I asked. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it slipped out. Too direct. Too soon. She blinked, thrown off. What reservation? You left your phone on the counter, I said. Screen lit up with a reminder. Nico's. Tonight. Table for 2. Her jaw clenched just slightly. I didn't know you were into fancy dinners alone, I added. She didn't answer right away. Just walked over, took her phone, and locked it without even glancing at the screen. Wow, she muttered under her breath. You show up unannounced, dig through my phone, and now you're interrogating me? I didn't dig. You don't get to do this, she snapped. You left, remember? You disappeared. No calls, no explanations. You just dropped off the planet. And now you want answers from me? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The words I had planned, something about trying to make amends, trying to understand, felt small now. She turned away from me and walked toward the kitchen, grabbing a half-finished glass of wine from the counter. That reservation's none of your business, she said, not looking back. You lost the right to ask me anything when you chose to vanish. I followed her, not quite ready to back down. So what? Someone moved in while I was gone? She turned slowly, and for a second her face softened. But only for a second. No, she said. But someone stopped waiting. There was a long silence. Heavy. That sentence landed like a punch I hadn't braced for. She took another sip of her wine and set the glass down harder than necessary. You think this is still your house? She said. You think you can just come back and we'll pick up where we left off? No, I said quietly. But I thought maybe, I don't know, that you might still care. She looked at me for a long time. Not cruelly, not even angrily, just tired, worn. This place stopped feeling like ours a long time ago, she said. I had to fill in the silence with something. Someone, I corrected, instantly regretting it. Her eyes didn't flinch. You don't want to go down that road. I stood there, staring at the floor tiles we'd picked out together 3 years ago. I remembered how we couldn't agree on a color, so we compromised on one we both hated slightly less than the rest. I remembered how she joked that the grout lines would be our biggest regret. I remembered thinking she was wrong, because it meant we had something to regret. Something real. Now it just looked like a stranger's kitchen. Why Nico's? I asked. Came out like a whisper. She looked confused for a second. Then her expression twisted. Not in guilt. In something closer to pity. Because he likes it, she said. I looked up sharply. He. She hesitated. You really want to do this now? My heart pounded. You could have just told me. You could have stayed. She**T back. You could have picked up the phone. You don't get to show up after half a year and ask me to explain the way I survived it. I didn't have a response. I couldn't argue that. Because she was right. I hadn't even really decided to leave. I just kept walking. 1 week became 3, and then suddenly it was 6 months of silence, like I'd convinced myself that not saying goodbye made it easier to come back. But now I saw it for what it was, cowardice dressed up as emotional clarity. I exhaled, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not here to fight, Laura. I just needed to see if there was still something worth fighting for. She looked at me for a long time. Really looked. Then she said, there was, but you gave it too much time to rot. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was final. A silence of acceptance. She walked past me without another word, grabbing her coat from the chair. That chair she used to hate. The one she used to say felt like sitting on a bag of sticks. I didn't ask where she was going. She paused at the door, hand on the knob. You should get some rest, she said. You look like you've been carrying something for a long time. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, soft and deliberate. I looked around again. Same house, same floor, same walls. But everything inside had changed. And maybe, just maybe, I was the last one to realize it. The mind's a traitor when it wants to be. After she left that night, probably straight to Nico's, I didn't move from the kitchen for what felt like hours. Just stood there, hands on the counter, replaying everything I had brushed off, explained away, or buried deep enough that I could pretend it never bothered me. But now, with the house cold and echoing around me, every quiet memory suddenly had a different sound to it. I used to think the decline started gradually, like the slow dimming of a bulb. But looking back now, I think I just didn't want to see it. Started with her phone. That's what I remember most clearly. The way it was always face down. Always. And that wasn't always the case. Laura used to leave it anywhere. Couch cushions, bathroom counter, even the fridge once when she was half asleep making a smoothie. But sometime late last spring, that changed. Suddenly, the phone had a permanent home. Screen down, silenced, locked tight. I'd joke about her being secretive, and she'd smile, say I was being ridiculous. But that smile never reached her eyes. Then came the late meetings. I'm not stupid. People work late. People have deadlines and teams and bad bosses and tight schedules. But not every Tuesday and Thursday. Not like clockwork. And not always dressed like she was going to a rooftop cocktail hour instead of a project planning session. Still, I said nothing. I told myself she was stepping up, leaning in, whatever other corporate phrase you want to slap on ambition. But deep down, I knew. The way she lingered by the door before leaving, like she was deciding whether to say goodbye. The way she came home with stories that sounded like they were half-built from headlines. Vague, polished, never specific. The lie wasn't the hardest part. It was the rehearsed truth. There was one weekend, a quiet one, late July, where she claimed she was taking a solo reset. Said she needed a break from everything, including me, to clear her head. I told her I understood. Even encouraged it. Go recharge, I said. Get some peace. I thought it was noble of me then. Supportive. Mature. Now I know how naive that was. She packed lightly. Took a bag smaller than what she usually used for yoga. I remember asking if she wanted help carrying it to the car, and she laughed. Too quickly, too loud. "It's not a funeral," she said. "I'm just driving to the coast for a few days." I believed her. I watched her drive away, wind in her hair, music playing. But what I didn't know, what I would later find out from a friend of a friend, was that she was never alone. She hadn't gone to the coast. She'd gone to the city, a hotel. 2 nights booked under her maiden name. 2 room keys, no photos posted, no receipts saved. Clean, too clean. But the moment I always go back to, the moment that should have snapped me awake, happened in a cafe. It was late August. I was supposed to be flying out for work, a last-minute conference trip to Chicago. My flight got canceled. I didn't tell her. I figured I'd surprise her. Maybe take her to dinner. Remind her that she still had someone waiting at home. I never made it to dinner. I went to this cafe downtown, the Gilded Bean, I think. It had just opened, one of those places that charged $5 for a pour-over and decorated with exposed pipes like that was a personality. She'd mentioned it once in passing. Said she liked the vibe, so I thought I'd pick up her favorite drink on the way home. When I walked in, the air smelled like vanilla and fresh paper. A quiet hum of conversation floated above the clinks of mugs and soft indie music. I remember scanning the tables and freezing mid-step. There she was, at the far corner, near the window, her back mostly turned to me. But I knew it was her. That laugh, that tilt of the head, the way she twirled her hair when she was trying to be charming. And she was being very charming. The man across from her looked relaxed, confident, a little too at ease with someone else's wife. I stood there like a statue, too far to hear clearly but close enough to watch the rhythm of her body language. She leaned in, smiled, brushed something off his sleeve. At one point she put her hand on his. Casual. Familiar. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let her see me. I just turned around, walked out, and stood on the street like I'd been *punched by the wind. I told myself it couldn't be what it looked like. Maybe it was a colleague, client. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. I know that now, because something shifted after that. She started hiding more, locking drawers, changing passcodes. She became allergic to *Macy, not in a physical way but emotionally. Like I was always on the outside of some joke I wasn't meant to hear. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd shrug like the answer didn't matter. She stopped asking me things too. Stopped listening. I come home and find the TV on a different profile. Wine glasses in the dishwasher when I hadn't touched a drop. Towels that were damp. But she'd claimed she hadn't showered yet. They were little things. So little. But they piled up like receipts of a life I wasn't invited to be part of anymore. Then came the irritation. Every question was an accusation. Every pause in conversation was a problem. If I asked about a weekend plan, I was suffocating. If I didn't ask, I didn't care. There was no right move. One time, I found a single earring on the bathroom counter. One I'd never seen before. Not Laura's style at all. She said it belonged to a friend, a coworker who'd crashed after a girls' night. But the next day, when I casually mentioned it again, she looked confused. Like she didn't remember the story she'd already told. She used to be good at lying. But lately it was like she'd stopped trying. Or maybe she thought I'd stopped caring. But the truth was, I hadn't stopped caring. I just stopped knowing how to reach her. And that confusion, that helplessness, it turned into something uglier. Something quieter. I stopped talking. Started leaving the house more. Taking longer drives. Making excuses to be anywhere else. And maybe that's what she wanted. Maybe that was the point all along. Maybe she needed me to drift far enough away that she could rewrite the narrative. Make it easier to pretend she didn't choose to betray me, that I had somehow abandoned her first. Because if I left emotionally, it made her feel justified in whatever she was doing behind closed doors. That's how these things go, right? Not a clean break. Just a slow fade into silence. Like a song that cuts out mid-chorus, and you're left humming the rest alone. And I guess that's what finally broke me. Not the lies. Not the other man. Not even the secret dinners or the bad excuses or the missing time. It was the realization that I was slowly being written out of her life like a character whose storyline was no longer relevant. And the worst part? I let it happen. There's a difference between suspecting something and knowing. For weeks, maybe longer, I had lived in that in-between space, where you wake up each morning telling yourself today will be different, and go to bed each night knowing it won't be. I had become fluent in reading silences, in filling gaps in stories, in ignoring things I didn't want to believe. But then it happened. Not a hint, not a clue, not a near miss or some blurry assumption. No, this was the moment the curtain dropped, and there was no mistaking what I was seeing. It was a Thursday evening, still warm out, early September. The sun was just starting to drop, casting long gold streaks through the living room windows. I had come home early from work, hoping to surprise her. That's what I told myself anyway. But if I'm honest, I think I was looking for something. A reaction. A mistake. Proof. I didn't find her at home. The house was dark, quiet, still holding that faint smell of perfume that didn't come from anything on my side of the sink. Her car was gone. I was about to call her. Actually had my phone in my hand, but something stopped me. A feeling. One of those low, sharp instincts that tells you the truth is near, and if you're not ready, you'd better back away now. Instead, I sat on the couch and waited. She walked through the door about an hour later. Her hair was up, face flushed, a half-smile lingering on her lips like the ghost of a laugh that didn't belong to me. She looked alive, in a way I hadn't seen in months. She didn't see me at first. She went straight into the kitchen, dropped her keys on the counter and started humming. Actually humming. Like someone in a good mood. That's what struck me hardest. She hadn't hummed in weeks. Hadn't even spoken in more than 5-word sentences around me. When I stepped into the light, she jumped. Not because she was surprised to see me home, but because she'd been somewhere else in her mind. Somewhere far away. "Oh," she said, clutching her bag a little tighter. "I didn't know you were home." "I got off early," I said, keeping my voice level. "Didn't feel like sitting in traffic." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "You should have texted." "I didn't think I had to," I said, then added, "Where were you?" Her shoulders tensed just a fraction, but I caught it. She opened the fridge like that motion would buy her time. "I went for a walk. Had to clear my head." "A walk?" I echoed. "In heels." She froze, looked down, then back up, quick to recover. "I stopped at the cafe too. Met up with Chloe. We talked. That's all." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but something in me knew. "Which cafe?" I asked as casually as I could. She hesitated. "You know, the one near the bookstore. The Brindle Cup." "You hate the Brindle Cup?" I said before I could stop myself. "You said their lattes taste like chalk." She blinked, then shrugged. "They fixed the recipe, I guess." And right then, something inside me cracked. Not exploded, just split. I nodded slowly and said nothing more. She went upstairs to shower. That night, after she fell asleep, deep, peaceful sleep, like someone with nothing to hide, I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, and stared at my own reflection in the dark window. I looked like a ghost of myself, pale, tired, hollow-eyed. I should have confronted her then, but I didn't, because the truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't always announce itself like a thunderclap. Sometimes it slides in sideways, quiet, patient, and then, when you least expect it, it starts speaking in her voice. A few days later, I stopped waiting for answers. I stopped hoping. I stopped lying to myself. I started listening. One night late, it was past 1 a.m. I had been lying awake for hours, and I heard her in the office down the hall. Quiet, like she thought I was asleep. I only heard it because I'd gotten up to get a glass of water. I moved slowly down the hall, bare feet silent on the floor. The office door was cracked open an inch. Just enough. Inside, she sat at her desk, her phone pressed to her ear, her back to me. Her voice was soft. Soft in the way she used to speak to me years ago. Sweet, unguarded. "I know," she was saying, laughing under her breath. I wish you were here too. Pause. No, he doesn't know. He never notices anything. Another pause. I just pretend I'm tired. He doesn't ask questions anymore. My hands clenched involuntarily. Then the laugh. That laugh. The one that used to belong to our inside jokes, our dumb midnight stories, our stolen moments in the car parked in front of 7-Eleven when we were too broke to afford real dates. That laugh used to be ours. And now it was his. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to hear her make plans. Real plans. Nothing vague or flirty or uncertain. It was specific. Concrete. A weekend away. A hotel. A reservation under a name that wasn't mine. She mentioned Nate by name. That's when I knew. I didn't need to see them together. I didn't need photos or text messages or any of the proof people chase like trophies after the truth's already punched them in the stomach. I heard it. I heard the way she spoke like I didn't exist. Not in theory. Not in anger. But in reality. I was already gone in her world. After a few more minutes, she said goodbye to him with this softness in her voice that I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Then she hung up, sat in silence for a beat, and closed her eyes like she was holding onto his voice. I stepped away before she saw me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go back to our bedroom. I sat outside, on the back porch, watching the sky lighten in slow motion, asking myself the dumbest question anyone in my position ever asks. Why? Why him? Why now? Why not just leave? But there are no satisfying answers to betrayal. No satisfying narrative where it makes sense. There's just truth. Unwelcome. Uninvited. Undeniable. And once you've heard it in someone else's voice, in your wife's voice, in the home you built together, it changes you. Carves out a part of you that you don't get back. A week passed before I said anything. Not because I was unsure, but because I was numb. I was studying her the way you study a storm on the radar. You know it's coming. You know it's going to hit. You're just not sure how bad it's going to be. She was different with me after that night. Maybe she sensed something. Or maybe she just stopped pretending. She'd come home later. Shower immediately. Sleep with her phone under her pillow. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine for long. And I stopped asking. Because I already had the answer. I just hadn't said it out loud. Yet, coming back after 6 months wasn't like stepping into an old life. It was like walking into a dream someone else was still having. I told myself it would be familiar. That even after everything, the floorboards would still creak in the same places, the windows would still rattle when the wind kicked up off the ridge, and the cabinet under the sink would still swell from that leak I never got around to fixing. I told myself there would be some small part of me still imprinted on this place. Something that would whisper, you belong here. But the house didn't recognize me anymore. And honestly, I didn't recognize it either. First, it was just little things. The couch cushions were different. She used to hate throw pillows, said they were pointless decorations, but now there were 5 of them, carefully arranged like a catalog photo. The art on the walls had changed too. The old prints we'd picked out at that street fair in Asheville were gone, replaced with abstract, colorless pieces that looked expensive and meant nothing. And then there were the shoes. A pair of boots by the front door, too big to be hers. Not mine. Not anyone I recognized. Next to them, a denim jacket on a hanger that looked brand new. It wasn't hers either. Laura didn't wear men's jackets. At least she didn't used to. I didn't ask right away. I told myself they could belong to a friend, or a brother visiting, or a neighbor who stopped by and forgot them. But the explanation didn't fit the weight in my chest. The pieces were too carefully placed. Like someone lived here. And not just recently. For a while. Then I noticed the pictures. On the mantel was a framed photo I hadn't seen before. Laura, in a yellow sundress I didn't recognize, smiling at someone just out of frame. Her body leaned left, arm extended like she had it wrapped around someone, but whoever it was had been cropped out, or deliberately framed that way. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. I stood there staring at it longer than I should have. The photo was recent. I could tell by the short haircut she'd gotten in late summer. Her eyes looked alive in it. Happy. Not just smiling for the camera. That was what cut deepest. She hadn't looked that alive in any photo I'd taken of her in the last year we were together. Later, I found a notebook on the side table, half buried under a stack of magazines. It wasn't hidden, just there, like it belonged. Inside, the handwriting wasn't hers. The notes were quick, blocky, written in ink that had bled slightly into the pages. Grocery lists, dates, song lyrics. Nothing obviously incriminating. But the name Nate appeared twice in the margins, both times circled, both times connected to little arrows and notes I couldn't fully make sense of. Nate, the name from the phone call, the name from the cafe, the name from the reservation. I whispered it aloud just to hear how it sounded. I had to. I needed to feel the shape of it in my mouth. And it felt wrong, like trying to pronounce a word from a language you don't know but still somehow understand. Nate. I didn't know who he was, not yet. But I could feel him everywhere. He was in the playlist that auto-started when I opened her laptop, full of bands I'd never heard of. He was in the glass she left out overnight, half full of a whiskey she never used to drink. He was in the scent of cologne that didn't belong to me lingering faintly in the hallway when the air conditioner kicked on. And he was in her, in the way she walked through rooms like someone else was watching. In the way she sat at the edge of the couch instead of curling up like she used to, like she was saving space that no longer belonged to me. But what really got to me, what really twisted in my gut, was how natural it all felt. Like this hadn't been a sudden change. Like it hadn't happened in the weeks since I left. It had been building for a long time. Quietly, slowly, like ivy curling up a wall, unnoticed until it cracks the bricks beneath it. One night, a few days after I came back, I wandered into the garage. I don't even know why. Maybe I was hoping to find something untouched. Some tool or box or leftover scrap of the life we'd built together. Instead, I found a second set of weights on the rack. Not hers. Not mine. A heavier set. The kind you don't use casually. Dumbbells worn at the edges from use. Next to them, a gym bag that wasn't ours. Inside, deodorant, extra socks, a t-shirt with a local CrossFit logo, a bottle of vitamins, and, buried at the bottom, a folded paper receipt from a smoothie place across town, timestamped 5:42 a.m. She never worked out in the mornings. She barely got out of bed before 7 o'clock. I stood there holding that bag like it was a piece of evidence in a trial I never got to testify in. The invasion wasn't loud. It wasn't some man breaking in and throwing his clothes all over the place. It was quiet, precise, intentional. He hadn't moved in. He'd grown in, like a memory that had been waiting to be remembered. And suddenly, the house didn't feel haunted by the past anymore. It felt haunted by someone else's present. I didn't confront her. Not yet, because I needed to know if she would bring it up on her own. If there was even a part of her left that felt the weight of what she'd done. If she'd admit that someone else had filled the space I left behind, and maybe even the space she never offered me to begin with. But she didn't say a word. She carried on like everything was fine. She asked if I wanted coffee one morning, her voice even polite. She asked if I needed laundry done. She asked if I planned to stay the weekend, like I was a guest, a tenant. And maybe that's exactly what I was now. Not a husband, not a partner, just a placeholder. A ghost that had forgotten to move on. The next morning, I opened the kitchen drawer where we used to keep our spare keys. I was looking for the one to the shed, the one she always left jammed behind the matches. But the drawer was rearranged. Neat, organized, sterile. A single key sat in the center of a velvet dish, attached to a keychain I didn't recognize. Black leather, stamped with a silver N. No other keys, just that one. I held it in my hand for a long time. I didn't need to ask anymore. He had lived here. Maybe not officially. Maybe not with a drawer full of socks and a toothbrush beside hers. But in the ways that matter, in her routines, in her expressions, in the new rhythms of the house. He had lived here. And I had been erased. Replaced. Without a word. They say you can't go home again. I used to think that was just a poetic way of saying things change. Now I know better. It's not about change. It's about dissonance. It's about stepping into a place that looks like home, smells like home, but makes your skin crawl like you're trespassing in someone else's skin. That's what the house became for me. Not haunted, but hostile. It wasn't always obvious. Not at first. Started as a feeling in my chest, like pressure. Like I was being watched from nowhere in particular. I'd walk into a room and feel like someone had just walked out. Like I'd missed something important by a few seconds. At night, I'd hear soft creaks in the hallway. Familiar ones. Like the floorboard outside our bedroom that always groaned under her heel. But I'd open the door, and the hallway would be empty. No lights, no sound. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses do that, right? They remember. But it wasn't just sound. It was smell. That damn smell. Not the usual ones, the lemon cleaner she used on weekends or the floral scent of her shampoo. But something new. Earthier. Heavier. Like expensive cologne worn too late in the day. It would hang in the air near the stairs. Or in the garage. Or worse, on the bedsheets. Just faintly. Not enough to prove anything. Just enough to torment me. One night, I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I caught it again. That scent. Stronger this time. I froze, holding my breath, waiting for footsteps. But there was only the hum of the fridge. I checked the front door. Locked. Same with the back. No windows open. No one inside but me. And Laura, who was asleep upstairs. Or at least pretending to be. I started noticing other things. Things that didn't make sense unless you were looking closely. The cabinet doors would sometimes be slightly ajar in the morning, even though I knew I closed them. The thermostat would be adjusted to her ideal temperature even if I hadn't touched it. Food I didn't eat would go missing. Toiletries I didn't use would run low. First, I chalked it up to her. Maybe she was doing it. Maybe she was keeping the house running by herself while silently resenting me for intruding again. But then came the footprints. One rainy morning, I went to grab the mail. As I opened the door, I looked down. And there, imprinted faintly in the mat, were two different sets of wet shoe prints. One was hers, small and neat. The other, larger, deeper, not mine. I stared at them for a long time. They were side by side, walking in, together. When I asked her who had come by, she said, "No one. I haven't had visitors." Her tone was dry, final. "You sure?" I asked, trying to keep it light. "Positive," she replied, not even looking up from her phone. I stood there, watching her fingers tap across the screen, her face lit by that cold blue glow. I wanted to snatch it from her hand. Instead, I nodded and walked away. Later that day, I checked the mudroom. Another set of footprints, dried now in the tile. Not tracked all the way through. Just standing there, as if someone had come in and stopped short, and then vanished. I started losing track of time. I'd sit on the couch and realize hours had passed. Entire afternoons where I'd meant to do something. Check emails, call a friend, anything. But instead I'd just drift off into thought. Or sit frozen, replaying the same conversation in my head. Who is Nate? When did he start coming around? Did he ever leave? I wasn't sleeping well either. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see flashes. Laura at the cafe, laughing. The cropped photo. The key with the N. The gym bag. The circled name in the notebook. The phone call. The voice that wasn't meant for me. The version of her that no longer included me. Some nights I'd hear a door close softly around 2 or 3 a.m. I'd go check, heart racing, only to find nothing out of place. Once, I swore I heard a man's voice, just a murmur, from upstairs. When I got to the top of the steps, Laura was in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. I asked her the next morning if she'd been on the phone late. She just frowned. "No, maybe you were dreaming." I heard a voice. "You probably left the TV on." "I didn't." She shrugged and went back to her coffee. No fear, no guilt, just indifference. That's what scared me most. She wasn't nervous about being caught. She wasn't trying to hide. She was done. Done caring if I noticed, because I was no longer part of the life she'd built around her. One afternoon, I sat in the spare room, what used to be my office, and tried to sort through some old files. I found a drawer full of things I didn't recognize. Not mine. Not hers. A receipt from a camping supply store 2 towns over. A printed photo of a lake I'd never been to. A worn leather bracelet with the initials N.J. carved into it. Stuff that felt left behind. Stuff that felt deliberately stored. As if someone else had once used that room. Lived here. Existed here. I began to feel like I was unraveling. I'd wake up and question if I'd locked the door. If I'd closed the garage. If I'd imagined the voice. Or the scent. Or the footprints. And when I asked Laura, when I finally broke down and said, "Do you feel like someone else is still here?" She looked at me with a calm, flat stare and said, "What are you talking about?" "I mean this house," I said. "It doesn't feel like just us." She didn't blink. "You mean you? What?" "It doesn't feel like you belong here anymore." She said it so casually, not cruelly, not even with spite, just plainly, like it was a statement of fact. Correction. And I had no answer, because the longer I stayed, the more I realized I wasn't just out of place. I was out of time. This life, this house, this version of her. It had moved on, without me, and maybe, just maybe, without anyone really noticing. A few nights later, I woke up with the overwhelming urge to check the backyard. I don't know why. I just felt it, deep in my gut. Something was off. I grabbed a flashlight, threw on a jacket, and stepped outside. It was cold, quiet. Nothing moved. I scanned the edges of the yard, the trees, the shed, the corner of the fence. That's when I saw it. A second patio chair had been dragged a few feet from the table, facing hers, like someone had been sitting across from her, like they'd been out here talking, drinking, sharing something I hadn't been invited to. I walked over and crouched beside it. On the ground, a bottle cap, still damp with condensation. A cigarette butt. Laura didn't smoke. I never had. I stood there for a long time, heart thudding, breath visible in the cold air. I didn't need a camera. I didn't need to catch them. I didn't need to hear it again. He had never left. Not really. He had just waited for me to go. And now that I was back, I wasn't disrupting their life. I was disrupting his. It all came out one night, not in a screaming match, but in a quiet unraveling. I asked her if she'd ever actually let go of him, of Nate. She didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed, as if she'd been waiting for the question. "He never left," she said. "Not really." I asked if she ever mourned the end of that relationship or just built her next one on top of it. She looked at me like I'd missed the point entirely. "I didn't build anything. I escaped." That's when I saw it. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd betrayed herself, her reality, her past. She never ended that relationship emotionally. She just masked it, buried it under our life. But his presence had remained. In her thoughts, her choices, her silences. I wasn't her partner. I was her distraction, her denial. And once I knew that, there was no coming back from it. No apology, no closure. Just a quiet, irreversible shift in everything I thought was real. After that night, the house stopped pretending. No more shared routines, no more lingering hope. She didn't beg. I didn't accuse. There was nothing left to preserve. We coexisted for a few days, packing silence into boxes. She moved out first. I stayed. Not because I wanted to keep the past, but because I wanted to face it honestly without pretending anymore. I changed things slowly, took down the art, donated the couch, reclaimed space that had become someone else's. The house wasn't warm now, but it was truthful. For once, I wasn't invisible. I could breathe without asking permission. And Laura, wherever she went, could no longer live as if love was something you could stash away, hide in drawers, or share between ghosts. Whatever we were, we weren't that anymore. But what I had now, what I was left with, was mine. And that, finally, was enough.